What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for clicking through. This is the No Tomatoes podcast, the very first episode, the pre-season, season 1, episode 0. The reason this is episode 0 is because it's a very special episode in that we wanted to cover the politics surrounding the general election that's coming up. So it's a little bit earlier than we were planning on actually releasing the podcast, but we thought it was a great idea to cover politics because it's such an important aspect of our lives, and we didn't want to skim over that. You might be asking, why would you want to start a podcast? That answer is really a two-part answer, and it is mainly to give our band a chance to interact with our audience and the people who listen to our music on a more personal level, but also it is a chance to give local figures a chance to talk about their passions and really their life's purpose in a lot of cases. So I really hope you guys enjoy this episode with Rob Kilgo. He's super cool guy. He's really involved in politics and has a passion for motivating young people to be involved in politics, because oftentimes it's super easy for us as younger people to ignore politics and focus on more of our personal lives. But I think it's very important for us to have a hand in politics and vote, because we have such an amazing freedom in this country to do so and be informed in doing so. This episode is much earlier than the rest of the episodes, and the rest of the episodes won't be released until January, but we're very excited to start releasing those for you. So don't forget, we will be hounding you on our profile about the brand new content that we're bringing to you. So look for that in January. Thank you so much for watching. If you're on the audio version, you won't be missing too much. And it's very convenient having podcasts, doing other things. So I hope you enjoy it. What's up, guys? Welcome to the No Tomatoes podcast. This is episode 0. I'm here with Rob Kilgo, and he's going to be talking to us, with me, only me. Usually there's more of us, but since this is a special episode, it's just going to be me and him. Rob is currently our student body president at Grace Christian University. He grew up a missionary kid in Malaysia. Am I correct?
Yep, you're right.
And I also heard tell that you play piano.
I do. I played for 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Little known fact.
So, along those lines, do you have any musical theater experience?
No, I don't. No, I wish.
Have you seen Hamilton, though?
I keep telling myself I'm going to watch it.
Oh, you haven't
and
seen
then I
it?
haven't seen it yet. I know.
Dang.
I've heard really good things, though.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty. My fiance is super into musical theater, but I ended up only watching the first half of it. But what I saw was really good.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had seen it.
It's on the to-do list for sure.
Yeah. I guess kind of an icebreaker question. What was it like being a missionary kid? And kind of tell us about how long you were in Malaysia and what kind of how you grew up. And do you think that gives you a unique perspective on politics here?
Sure. So, growing up a missionary kid was an extreme privilege. I'm not going to lie, it really was. But I didn't grow up in the traditional sense a missionary kid. When I was 13 or 14, my dad moved, we sold our house and moved to Malaysia. So I was already pretty well into my development at that point. I grew up in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, the outskirts, and we lived a pretty good life. My dad one day woke up and for the next 3 weeks kept waking up every day with only one thought on his mind, and that was missions. And he'd go to work and sit at his desk, and he would tell us about this when he would come home. He would just sit there and just want to be out on the field. And me and him had gone on some short-term missions in the past to Kenya. So he'd already had a taste for it, knew what it was about, and for some reason it just stuck to him. I don't say for some reason. It was a calling for sure. It was God's calling to him. So I was 14 when I moved to Malaysia for the first time. I was a freshman in high school. So I spent that year all the way to my senior year in Malaysia. So all of my high school years I spent there. And that was absolutely such a cool experience, because not a lot of kids in America get to travel abroad, ever.
Yeah.
I know
It's true.
most people that go here have never been out of the United States.
Yeah.
And I know it was in a mission capacity, but still having those experiences were super valuable. So yeah, I would say definitely it informs how I view politics because it let me get outside of my box. It let me get outside of this country and see what else was out there.
Mm.
I've been to 16 countries now total, just through traveling or whatnot,
Wow.
and every place is so different. And the United States is no different than that. We have our own political system,
Hmm.
our own way of doing things, and we have our faults, but other countries do too. And so it's being able to go to those countries and seeing what's great about them, but also their setbacks that lets you take a step back here and see what's great about America, but also what our setbacks are. So,
Wow, that's really cool.
yeah.
So, I guess I know you're super involved in politics, but I don't know exactly what your plan is
Me neither.
for your future. You don't know either. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I've always wanted to be a politician. But if that turns out that's not the best way for me to be able to help people through the political process, then I'll find a different way. Right now, I'd love to get some experience working in local government. I think working in communities that aren't doing as well as others would be my passion right now. So poorer communities like Wyoming would be a great example of
Yeah.
a community that is not necessarily super distressed, but it has its issues, and they're pretty easy for you and I to see. I would think.
Yeah. That's Wyoming, Michigan, for
Yes,
anyone
sorry,
who
Wyoming,
doesn't know
Michigan.
that.
Um, so yeah, I think I'd love to get started in local politics, because as I'm sure we'll talk about, all politics is local.
Mm.
So if something, the president's important, the vice president's important, your governor's important, but the people that actually make decisions that affect your lives the most are the state house, the state senate,
Mhm.
and your local county officials. So if you can make change at a local level, you're actually able to help more people, I think, than maybe at the national level.
Mm. That's a good perspective to have. I think a lot of us. That's kind of gets to another question I had later on, but
Hmm.
we might as well just go over it now. A lot of us in America think, the presidential election, it's the big thing, um,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing we vote for. Um, and I don't think that's really the way we should be handling this. And you seem to agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forgetting the presidential election for a second, it doesn't have as much influence over your life as the media would have you think. It's like, oh, well, if Donald Trump's reelected, then this is so and so is going to happen to your life.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. The reason it's so relevant is because it's always in our faces, and that's why we're always thinking about it. And of course, the president is an important person and an important job to have,
Mhm.
because they do have the ability to make widespread changes that affect the entire country. And also, they are our representative of our country. So they are who other countries look at as our representative. So when they see the president, they see us through the president.
Yeah, that's true.
So in that
That's
way, yeah, it's important. But local politics have more influence over your life. They just do.
Mhm.
They affect your taxes that you pay, the roads that you have in your cities, the quality of your water, the quality of the air. All that stuff is pretty local. And so in a very real sense, the day-to-day stuff that you go through is more local politics than not. And it's such a shame that people will, get their ballots or go to the polls, and they'll fill out president, vice president, maybe their U.S. senator
Mhm.
if they do. I don't know. Some people don't too. And then they'll just leave the rest blank.
Yeah.
Like county commissioner, the prosecutor, or stuff like that.
Well, even policies that
Yes.
are on the ballot. I
Yeah.
think sometimes people overlook those.
Like propositions, yeah.
Yeah,
Michigan
yeah.
had a recent example. I'm not a resident of the state. I still live in Georgia,
Mm.
technically. So I think it was 2018 or 2019, the state legalized recreational marijuana. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one issue. That's a bigger one. I think people really did vote on that one. But the other ones that are worded in a more legal way, sometimes people just look over those and don't even fill them out.
Mm.
And that's a shame, because beyond the legal terms, there are actually decisions that affect your life in them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha. Another question I have for you is I heard that you don't really affiliate yourself with a political party. I guess what are your views on political parties, and why do you not choose to affiliate with one of them?
I would say that I loosely affiliate myself with political parties, in the sense that in America, for the big races, well, actually most races, one of the two parties wins. A Republican's going to win or a Democrat's going to win. Independent governors is pretty much non-existent. I'm pretty sure Gary Johnson in New Mexico was an independent governor. He's one of the few. So usually you have to look at politics through one of those two prisms. So when it's all said and done, I would say I am a fairly liberal person. But I don't want to say I'm blindly loyal to one party or person because, first off, I think that's the wrong mindset to have about politics, is that, oh, well, this guy's great and I'm going to vote for him no matter what. That should never be the case.
Yeah.
Not with Democrats, not with Republicans. Because beyond the rhetoric, I think Democrats and Republicans are the same in a lot of ways. People don't really think about that too much, but they really are. Republicans raise the debt ceiling just as much as Democrats do. They did it in 2018. The deficit is just as high as it would be under a Democratic president right now. And Democrats vote alongside Republicans for warrantless wiretapping of our phones through the Patriot Act. You know what that is at all?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
Patriot Act.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Both parties are they're pretty in sync with that one.
Yeah. I
so-
mean, why wouldn't they be?
Right. It gives them a lot of access to
Yeah,
us.
exactly.
So, but I say that to mean that I normally probably would vote for a Democrat, but I am not opposed in any measure or any way of voting for a Republican. I really am not. I think the senator you guys have up here, John James, seems like a pretty good guy. I looked into his policies a little bit. He seems like like he would be a good senator. I haven't looked into Gary Peters as much, but generally I like to look at races as the person. I don't look at the party next to their name as much. I research the person. And I found that to be incredibly helpful in making a really informed decision, with what closely aligns with me the most, I guess.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you think that because I personally I lean more towards the side of voting third party just because I believe that the two political parties having so much power is a little bit ridiculous in general. But do you think that there is is that view a little bit idealistic in your opinion? And do you think that there is any hope for third party candidates in the presidential election or even in gubernatorial elections to become elected in either this presidential race or future ones?
Yeah, it's definitely idealistic, but not in a bad way, though. It's good to have ideals. And I would say for the president's race, at least, we'll start there. I would say it'd be pretty near impossible for a third party to be elected right now. It's just how it is. Third party candidates are much less funded. The funding they get is, pennies compared to what
Right.
The major party nominees get.
Yeah.
I think I heard Biden right now has $420 million sitting in the bank. And we have, 15, 16 days to the election?
Yeah.
So, and I promise you, Joe Jorgensen or Howie Hawkins wishes they had that kind of money.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
So money is power in this country. If you have money, you're going to do well in politics. And so what you see here is a Republican Party and a Democratic Party that have spent decades and, honestly centuries in different forms building up their political clout, their foundations and their bases to the point where they're pretty impossible to go against. It's not always impossible, but it's pretty hard. So, yeah, I'd say with the current electoral college system that we have, it'd be hard for a third party to win. You need 270 to win. So that would have to be such a good candidate that both the Democrat and the Republican running were just awful compared to them, which isn't impossible, but people are pretty blindly loyal to their parties. Both sides are.
Yeah.
So with that being said, you're always going to have a certain majority or a certain population that's going to vote for their parties no matter what. So that's the tough part with that. But for Senate and governor races, it's a little more doable, but it's the same thing, money.
Right.
It comes down to funding. If a third-party candidate was able to get the amount of money that a Democrat or Republican did in a Senate race or a governor race or a gubernatorial race, they would do quite well. I don't know if they would win, but they would do really well because there is a lot of wanting for a third party.
Yeah.
I think a third party system would be great. I also think that it'd be cool if we had a national popular vote that decided the president too.
Mm.
That's pretty controversial, I guess, still. But that way, if there's 3 candidates running, 4 or 5, 6 candidates running, whoever got the most votes of those 6 people wins.
Yeah.
It doesn't come down to Electoral College. It doesn't
Right.
come down to Michigan, Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania,
Right.
Arizona now. It comes down to who has the most votes. So let's say the Democrat gets 13 million votes. They'd get way more. But the Republicans get, 14, and the Libertarian gets 17. They win, and they're the president. They have the mandate of the country, of the majority of the country to lead. And that seems to me today like a better solution that would give people, I don't know, a broader sense or feel like they would feel like they have broader access to the political process.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I'm off base, but from my understanding, what you were saying is basically the states currently, we have what's called a swing state,
Mhm.
and we have, so the states determine as a whole whether their state votes for the president or not.
Correct.
Yes.
So basically, Michigan is pretty much always a swing state.
Mhm.
It went to Trump in 2016 by 10,704 votes.
Mhm.
It's within the margin of error with polling,
Yeah.
But if it was to swing the other way and Biden got 10,704 more votes this time, he wins the state,
Yeah.
and the 16 electoral college votes that come with the state.
Mhm.
So it's kind of messy,
Yeah.
The other half, if it's close to half of the population that votes for the other guy, gets completely disregarded in this state. And I don't know, I just can't get with that system. People
Yeah.
try to convince me otherwise all the time, but
Yeah. Well, I know the argument's always how do you deal with that volume of ballots and sorting through all of them and doing it effectively.
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of semantics because you have to do the same thing when within the state anyways.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah, it happens.
I mean,
And there would be you could make it so there's a system that the states would count their own ballots and then send them in,
yeah.
The biggest one I always hear about is, well, it would give the cities more power over the rural areas, like the areas that are less populated.
Right.
It's true, but that's if you consider a city a person. City is not a person. The people in those cities are.
True.
And so that's where the people live.
Right.
And if they vote a certain way, then that's how it is.
Yeah.
And you have to adjust your politics to fit that.
Mm.
The majority of America is Democratic, like by registered voters. I think it's by a significant portion, but because of the system, they don't always win, basically.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how it is,
Cool. That's interesting perspective. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So a little bit shifting gears, but obviously you're a student at a Christian university and you grew up a missionary kid starting at the age of 14.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Mhm.
But how does your faith affect your political actions and decisions? Is the question, and then I want to talk about how I kind of approach this election because, my faith really drives what I tend to do and decide, and sometimes with the current worldview that I have, I know that we're never going to be free from evil or issues that we have in this world, and sometimes that discourages me from even wanting to talk about these things because I know we're never going to get to the solution. So how do you combat that as a Christian and still remain active in politics?
Yeah, so it's tough. That kind of touches on separation of church and state, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah.
But I would say my faith influences my politics through the morals that our faith, our shared faith, gives us. So Jesus Christ talked a lot about loving your neighbor, or helping the least of these, or wishing no harm on your enemy, and in fact helping them if they so need it.
Mhm.
And so those kinds of morals is what I take into the political process with myself. It's like, who do I think would better represent those on the national scale?
Mm.
It's not always one party or the other.
Mhm.
It definitely is not. But so I let my morals affect my worldview, and then change my worldview affects how I view politics. I don't want a big statue of Jesus in D.C. or think that we should have the Ten Commandments at every state, city hall.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you're a Christian, you should let your morals affect your decision making at least a little bit.
Yeah.
At least in how you treat others.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the thing I take away from it the most. Is also I realize that not all Americans are Christians, and we're not a Christian country per se.
Yeah.
We're majority Christian,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of other faiths, hundreds of other faiths in this country.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's important that we don't necessarily exclude them because this is their country too. And if we ever want to show them what we see in Christianity, then forcing our religion down their throats through the government just feels like a bad way to go about it to me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I actually completely agree with you. I know many people here would, tend to back off and be off put by that perspective.
Oh, yeah.
But I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that disagree with that on campus with me, but hey, it's all right.
Yeah, I mean that's
It is what it is.
that's
how
what
I feel.
America's about is freedom of thought, freedom of speech, right?
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. So we also talked about this a little bit as well, in that the states determine the govern or the presidential election. Is that the same for Senate and
So the
Supreme
Senate
Court?
is a direct popular vote. Whoever gets the most votes in the state for that particular office wins.
Okay.
So it's just the presidency that is the electoral college.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Okay. Yeah, this is a little bit more philosophical. But do you think that our current governmental system allows for true democracy in that people have the ability to affect politics as an individual?
Well, America, or the United States to be more exact, is a federal constitutional republic. So we're not even a true democracy.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, no, because we elect people who in turn go and they're supposed to carry out the will of the people.
Mhm.
They don't always carry out the will of the people. Congress notoriously has a super low approval rating among Americans. I think it's like 28%.
Wow.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
They don't get any. I feel like just from looking in what you see at the news, they don't get anything done. And that's a shame because we send them there to get things done. So in a way, we have influence over policy because if we express enough public opinion about something, then it most likely will get done. The problem is not enough people care about politics or the political system to express that public opinion about things. And so that's why politicians are able to skirt by and have partisan fights all the time because nobody really pays attention.
Mm.
People do, but how many people pay attention every day? How many
Right.
people follow politics, every hour even?
Yeah.
Not that many.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, it can feel really remote and distant to your everyday life. And I don't want to speak for politicians, but I think they enjoy that because it allows them to get by with some things that they shouldn't be able to
Yeah.
at times,
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So let's jump back into the separation of church and state issue.
Yeah.
I know that there are arguments on both sides for this, and the argument on the left tends to be the separation of church and state means that the government or the church should not interfere in government, and it should not have any say in what the government does, whether that be any religion whatsoever. And then the right tends to say, well, the separation of church and state phrase was found in a letter from Benjamin Franklin to a church of Anabaptists in, I don't remember what state.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And they basically claim, that's not what the separation of church and state means. It means that the government isn't going to interfere with the church in their worship. I don't know if you have an opinion on that particular interpretation, but regardless of that, I mean, you can comment on that if you want, but you don't have to.
I have an opinion on separation of church and state, for sure.
Yeah, just
Uh,
talk about it.
So, separation of church and state originally finds, you're right, Benjamin Franklin talks about it in letters. James Madison also talks about it. Thomas Jefferson also talks about it, along with other founders. So it wasn't just a Benjamin Franklin thing. A lot of those guys were escaping, the Pilgrims left England originally because of, honestly, because of religion and because of the king.
Yeah.
And so when the founders made this country, they wanted to make sure that wasn't an issue. A lot of the founders weren't even really Christians. I don't know if you knew that or not, but a lot of them were just deists, which means they believe there's a God out there, but
Right.
how involved he is uncertain.
Yeah.
But the First Amendment to the Constitution says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So those two clauses are known as the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, respectively. They form kind of the textual basis that we see today for the Supreme Court's interpretations of the separation of church and state. So the Supreme Court, their job is to interpret the Constitution. So traditionally, they have always gone to that text and pointed that you shouldn't make any law respecting any religion. You shouldn't coerce people into any religion. If people want to be religious, they should do so voluntarily of their own right. And so all citizens are free to reject whatever religion they'd like in America. In the eyes of the law, there should be no favorites. That's kind of that is the stance the Supreme Court has taken on separation of church and state. So it was originally founded in letters like that, but now it's literally based in how we think of the law. Because once the Supreme Court carries down or decides on a case, that in effect is the law. And the country honors it, and stuff like Brown v. Board of Education, where they desegregated schools, or Roe v. Wade, was a big one, where they legalized abortion on the federal level. So, in a sense, separation of church and state has not always been followed, though, not at all. In a lot of senses, it wasn't until recently, I don't know how recent, but people were praying in school still as like a daily thing.
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago until it got struck down by the Supreme Court. And every single one of our presidents, I'm pretty sure, has been a Christian, at least in the past 100 years.
Right, or at least claim
to be
religion,
Christian.
yeah.
Yep. And it's almost a prerequisite for the job. If Biden's tomorrow or Trump was like, yeah, I'm a Muslim, they probably wouldn't win.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of people still base their voting decisions on Christianity. And so yes, the Christianity does affect our country, and it had a hand in helping to create the country. But going forward, I think it would be in our country's best interest to really try to keep all religion out of government, just as a practice. And people already do, but in a country with the diversity of thought that America has, it is discriminatory to only cater to one religion over the other.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought on it. It's kind of what the Supreme Court has come to realize as well. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So how does that interpretation affect your views on policies like the legalization of abortion and the legalization of marijuana use on a federal level even?
Yeah. So probably the hardest thing I had to grapple with in, just getting into politics was abortion. Because even though Roe v. Wade was passed down by the courts 47 years ago, we're still talking about it today.
Yep.
And it's still a conversation of the 2020 election, the 2016 election,
Yep.
the 2012 election, 2008, and on and on and on. And it's a tough one for Christians because if you look at Scripture, I think is pretty hard to come to any conclusion other than that all life is sacred, you know,
Yep.
and that all life should be protected.
Yeah.
At the same time, where do you draw the line from including something of your religious texts into the government?
Mm.
You know, if you and I believe that, does that mean we should make it the law for everybody?
Mm.
And that's the debate. I personally would rather spend my time informing people on how to make safe choices, you know, either with contraceptives or whatever, or help them to understand what abortion is, rather than fighting a court case that was passed down passed down by Republican judges too, 47 years ago. Because I don't think it's going to get illegalized ever again.
Mm.
A majority of Americans support it, and so they have the majority opinion on their side. I know it's a rallying cry for a lot of people, though. If somebody says they're pro-life, they automatically get a lot of funding and a lot of votes.
Mhm.
And I just don't think it necessarily translates into them actually doing anything.
Mm.
But it's such a tough decision, and I respect anybody that feels differently than me on it, because it is. It's a tough one. But for the legalization of marijuana, it's the same thing. It's like, where do I, Bible never explicitly mentions marijuana.
Yeah.
Um,
I even found it was super funny. I even found this article. It was in some. I was on the database for school doing a paper.
Yeah.
It was on some Jewish newspaper that said, "Did they find marijuana in the tabernacle?" And I'm like, "That's pretty far fetched, but
That's super far.
kind of funny."
That is funny. Yeah, for marijuana, the studies show that it's less effective, or less, like, it affects you less or harms you less than alcohol does.
Mm.
And if that truly is the case, then why isn't it? Why isn't it legal already?
Yeah.
You know, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, make it legal, tax the crap out of it,
Yeah.
and then give people that
Yeah.
can't afford health care or whatever, help them afford health care.
Yep.
Or help make sure that the roads that are such a mess here in Michigan actually get paved for once.
Right.
But billions of dollars can come in revenue, new revenue, can come from taxing marijuana.
Yeah. Actual revenue, not fake revenue.
Yeah, actual
Yeah.
real money that can be quantified and used
Yeah.
like right away.
Yeah.
And
And-
to me, it's a no-brainer. I think probably 20 years from now, you and I will laugh that we even talked about this, because it'll be legal on at the federal level.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy that honestly, to me, it's crazy it's still illegal,
Yeah.
Nationwide. But
Yeah. Dude, it feels so good to have you say both of those issues. I 100% agree with you.
yeah,
And abortion is so hard to deal with as a
Mhm.
Christian. But I've come to the same conclusions.
yeah,
So
it's super tough because people will disagree with you on if you believe that. People here will disagree with you if you
Yeah.
believe that.
Yep.
And it's tough because they don't necessarily know your heart. They just hear that you're okay
Yeah.
with letting it stay legal,
Mm.
and they just judge you based off of that.
Yep.
And I don't know, that really gets on my nerves, because you don't know my heart necessarily,
Right.
or how I've thought about it, or anything else, or how those issues have impacted my own life. And you have to think the same way for people that do want it legalized. Like, why you have to put yourself in their shoes a little bit
Mhm.
and wonder why. So yeah, it's I think as Christians, people on this campus, but really nationwide, worldwide, could do a better job at being understanding and try to reflect Christ a little better, because it gives us a bad name when people go to Planned Parenthood and they have the baby killer signs outside,
Yeah.
and those are Christians, and it's like,
Yeah.
if that lady's not a Christian, do you think she's ever gonna want to be one?
Mm.
So that's just where I come from. It's like,
Yeah.
man, if you have a chance to make an impact in somebody's life, you don't judge them. Help them, walk alongside them, pull the log out of your own eye,
Yep.
and stop pointing at the needle in somebody else's.
Yeah. I think
So-
so much more could be accomplished through, coming alongside people and
Yes.
educating people with, proper contraceptive use, and creating those kinds of approaches towards this issue, I think could be so much more helpful.
I do too.
Yeah.
I really do.
Here's another general question about government. Do you think that the right wing in America has become overly nationalistic, believing that America is this infallible national superpower? And then conversely, on the other side, do you believe that the left wing idolizes other systems like Sweden and Europe to the point that we don't even see our benefits, the good side of America?
Yes and yes. But further, the right wing one. In America, we are a special country because of our Constitution and the ideas the founders put forth. But it has led us to believe that we are superior to every other country in the world. And that is such a toxic way to think about things because, we didn't have any say in being born in this country. We just woke up one day or, was cognitive, I don't know what the word is. One day we were here and we had no say in that whatsoever. And so just because somebody is somewhere else doesn't make them any less valuable, and just because our country is great right now doesn't make us the best, I think. We have a pride problem in this country for sure. And I think unrightfully so in a lot of ways, because we're the best in some ways, but we're not the best in a lot of ways. And it's okay to recognize that and realize that and work towards making ourselves a better country. 'Cause every country has problems, and we're just blessed to have a pretty great nation. Actually, we're the richest nation in history, and one of the most technologically advanced in history as well.
Yeah.
And so through that lens, we are extraordinarily blessed, but we shouldn't lose sight of how we got here, and we shouldn't lose sight of, I guess, our morals and values. Because it's easy just to let yourself get all puffed up and be like, oh yeah, America, we're the best, But for the left, I think a lot of them, it's a hard question to answer because the left is such a big tent.
Yeah, it's true.
You have
It's true.
you have
I can't-
social Democrats
yeah.
and conservative Democrats and liberals and leftists and everything in between there. And
I didn't mean to put you in a corner. I just
no,
thought it was a
I know
fun
you're
question.
not. You're not. But it's tough because some people that are left-leaning want this country to be communist. Some people that are left-leaning want this country to stay the same and just tweak a few things on how we do things.
Right.
And some people just don't want, any government at all.
Yeah.
But it's tough because, yes, I think we do idolize other countries a little too much, and we forget how good we have it here in a lot of scenarios. But most people like myself, I think, realize that the founders had fantastic and really brilliant ideas for this country. Like, our founding documents are so great, and the freedoms they give us, we really shouldn't forget them. Like, we shouldn't lose sight of them or forget what a privilege it is to have those benefits in this country. But I also think times change, and the founders recognized that. They did recognize that, and so that the system of governance eventually would change at least a little bit. I think that's okay. We're not the same country we were in 1776. Our guns
Definitely
don't
not.
take a minute to load.
Yep.
We have cell phones and cars and planes and stuff those guys literally could never even dreamed of. And so the way we have changed a little bit. The way the Supreme Court interprets cases has changed. The way they've interpreted the right to privacy has changed. So yeah, we're changing all the time, but I think the core of the Constitution stays the same throughout all of that. The Constitution itself was not a perfect document.
Well,
It allowed slaves to be counted as 3/5 of a person,
right.
and stuff like that. So in my mind, it's okay to look at it critically still, while also realizing the freedoms that it guarantees you and being very grateful for those. Yeah.
Great answer.
Yeah. Thanks.
So we're actually doing pretty good on time. We're about to close out. I just kind of want to ask, what advice can you give to voters right now that are listening to this podcast?
I would say if you are young and you want to see change in the political process, no matter what that change is, you got to vote. You got to do it. I know that it's easy for people our age to stay on the sidelines and not really have to care about these things and more care about, does so-and-so like me, or am I going to get a good grade on this? And it's hard to really tune into, what the bigwigs in Washington are doing
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis. But, the baby boomers of our time vote at a rate of 70%. So 70% of that generation and older, people that are in their 90s too, they vote.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
actually better than I thought.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
pretty good.
they show up, man. And if we don't show up, then we're not going to be represented
Yeah.
in the process.
Yep.
If we all showed up at the same rates that they do, we would win every election.
Mm.
Honestly, if we picked out a candidate, let's just say we did, and Gen Z just decided on a candidate, and millennials and Gen Z got together and decided, yeah, we're going to vote for him, and they all did, it wouldn't even be a question.
Yeah.
That guy would win. So if you feel like the political system doesn't work for you, or you look at the two candidates right now and you're like, man, these guys don't represent me at all, you got to vote. Because, especially in primaries, because primaries decided Donald Trump, primaries decided Joe Biden. And if you vote in both of those and you get all of your friends to do the same, and you vote for a candidate that you feel actually represents the values that you want America to represent to the world and, inwards, just got to show up and vote. Vote in the primaries, be active in politics, and then show up and vote in the general election.
Yeah. I have a confession to make.
What's that?
I didn't vote in the primaries.
That's all right.
It was partially because I moved and they were like, "Oh, you have to do all this extra stuff." But yeah, I should have. So.
Yeah.
You're right. We
that
gotta stand up.
That extra stuff makes a difference, though.
It does.
Even on campus, I've helped, 10 to 15 people register to vote. And at times, every single time that I helped them out, they had questions about the process. Like something came up and stopped them from finishing the registration for whatever reason. And I had to show them, oh, it's because you did this instead of this.
Right.
And if I hadn't been there, I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal here, but if I hadn't been there, or if nobody was helping them, they easily could have just given up right then and there.
Yeah.
And been like, oh, well, I'll do it another day, and just never do it another day.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening now. It's super important that we really invest at least a little bit of our time, into making sure that we research our candidates, every candidate, not just president and vice president.
Mm-hmm.
Research your drain commissioner, which I didn't know was an elected official until recently. But in Wyoming, Michigan, we elect a drain commissioner to a 4-year term.
Huh.
But it's important to know that stuff because it helps you make the future you want. And through that, the political system will start to work a little more for you. I hear a lot of young people be like, oh, well, the system's corrupt and it's rigged, and even if we vote, nothing will happen. It's not true. If you really vote and that candidate has a lot of support, then they're going to get places. And I think we've seen that, whether you agree with them or not, I think we've seen that in the candidacies of Bernie Sanders in 2016 and in 2020. The reason he got as far as he did was pretty much solely because of young people. Obviously, he didn't win, but young people came out for him, and Hillary Clinton, instead of, having the nomination as a foregone conclusion, she had to fight for it. And it was because young people showed up and wanted that kind of change. So it's possible, it really is, but it includes an electorate or constituents or citizens, in terms, showing up to vote and making a conscious effort to do so every time there's an option to do so. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Great closing statements. No, so I guess this is the part where I close on a recommendation and a quote of the day that will be a regular part of this podcast. We have actually recorded several of these before now, but we're publishing this one first because the presidential election is coming up really quickly. So
It is.
So what I want to end on for the recommendation is actually Rob's own podcast that he has, and I'll give you a second to talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, thanks, man. So me and my friend Justin McMaster, and if you go to Grace Christian University, you probably know us, wanted to start a podcast that helped young people that are our age get more involved in the political process. Because most of the people that we talk to here at Grace kind of just tune out on a day-to-day basis, and big news is not necessarily big to them. I might say, oh, there's this crazy news article that just came out, and nobody's even heard of it yet.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make a podcast where we kind of dilute or dumb down. I don't want to say dumb down, but kind of, condense,
Yeah.
make it a little easier to understand the weekly news, so that people that are our age feel like they can understand what's going on more in their communities and their states and their nation. So basically what we'll be talking about is current events. A big one's the presidential election. We probably won't cover that one too much, but we really want to cover our local communities as well. Because like we've talked about, all politics is local. And if you know a lot about your community, then you're able to make informed choices about voting or, just how to live your life inside your community. And stuff that happens here in Wyoming, Michigan is valuable for you and I to know about.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Justin and I are starting a podcast called We the Youth, Politics for Gen Z. And our goal is really just to help our peers kind of drown out, the mainstream media and just the different biases that those tend to have, and try to give people as unbiased news as possible. Obviously Justin and I have our own beliefs, but we really want to make it a goal to just give people the news and try to help them become more informed citizens. So yeah, make sure to check us out. Thanks.
That's awesome. I will definitely be listening. Again, for everyone, that is We the Youth, Politics for Gen Z with Robert Kilgo and Justin McMaster. So the quote of the day, just a quote that really resonated with me by John F. Kennedy was, "Do not pray for easy lives, pray to be stronger men."
Amen to that. That's all we can do.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, thank you all for watching and tuning in to the No Tomatoes podcast. I hope you all have a great day.
That's some pretty complicated stuff to play. You don't have respective hands?
I do.
You absolute trash. Having a good time. Like, just enjoying myself.
He was like so
It's just so
supportive.
fun. The song sucks. Yep, that's true.